Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rock Records Reviewed. My name's Adam, and this week we are going to look at the recorded output of the Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham era Fleetwood Mac. I think it's only fair to sort of separate the later Fleetwood Mac from the early Fleetwood Mac. They were such different bands. They started, of course, in England as a blues band with Peter Green and Danny Kirwan and Jeremy Spencer. But they went through many lineup changes, as is well documented. In the early 70s, there were legal things going on, and it wasn't until Mick Fleetwood heard Lindsey Buckingham rehearsing in a studio next door in LA that he thought, there's my next guitar player. He asked him to join, and Lindsey said, well, only if my girlfriend can join as well, and that was Stevie Nicks. These two were an item, but they were also a recording couple whose first album hadn't really set the world alight. So it was a sort of a very fortuitous meeting coming together, and of course it proved to be the catalyst to Fleetwood Mac going on to world domination for the next sort of couple of decades. But I'm only going to look at the Buckingham Nicks era albums because I think Lindsey Buckingham particularly is such a talent. He's such an interesting talent, such a maverick, that for me their albums without him are an infinitely less interesting proposition. So they made 6 albums with Buckingham Nicks, and the rest of the lineup was Mick Fleetwood on drums, John McVie on bass. Those two had founded the band, and John McVie's ex-wife Christine McVie on keyboards and vocals. Christine McVie was also, of course, a songwriter. So let's crack in. At number 6, I'm going to put Say You Will. Say You Will was the album they made without Christine McVie when they reformed in 2003. She had left the band at this point. This album suffers from a lot of things that albums around the time did that were released on CD. It's just too long. There are some lovely songs on here. There's Bleed to Love Her. There's What's the World Coming To. The title track is charming. It's lovely. Great Stevie Nicks song. But there is a lot of filler. It feels to me like they're just trying to fill the hour and 10 minutes of CD. So there's some very uninteresting songs in here, and you kind of lose interest by the end. It could have been condensed down to quite a nice, potent sort of 10-track record. It also suffers a little bit from modern recording techniques, which use a lot of compression. It's over loud. I prefer hearing the good songs on this album in a live context, and I think they stand up very, very well. But without Christine McVie's sort of smooth sweetness and her soft approach with the songwriting as well, there's a sort of harshness to it all. Certainly the least interesting of their 6 albums, I think. Number 5, I've put Mirage from 1982. This, compared to the albums that have preceded it, particularly Tusk, this feels very lightweight and throwaway. Songs like Oh Diane and Hold Me, they sound like the kind of things Lindsey Buckingham could write in his sleep, and possibly did. There are some good songs on here. Eyes of the World, Empire State, Gypsy, of course, another great Stevie Nicks song. And there's not really a bad song on it. I just think the whole thing just doesn't seem to carry any kind of emotional weight to it. It feels like they were caught all a little bit on autopilot when they made this. Number 4, Tango in the Night. This was their big comeback album in 1987. They'd been away for 5 years, and people were wondering whether they'd split up. Well, they hadn't. They came back with an absolutely enormous album. This sold millions of copies, and of course it has a lot of singles on it. It's got Big Love, Seven Wonders, Everywhere, Little Lies. I think this is a great record. I think it's a really nice nighttime driving record. It has that kind of atmosphere to it. It's dark and it's soft and it's glamorous, and it's I've always thought the aura around it is really appealing. Stevie Nicks was pretty strung out when this album was being made. I think it suffers again from a production perspective. It's very 80s sounding, and again I prefer hearing a lot of these songs in a live context, particularly Big Love, which Lindsey Buckingham does as a sort of solo acoustic thing, is absolutely staggering. It's fantastic. You must Google it, check it out. but look, it's a really, really great record. It's one of the kind of iconic '80s albums, and I think most dinner parties in the '80s were playing this, and it sounded great. But the three records that are above it in the list are more interesting records. So first at number 3, 1975's Fleetwood Mac. This was their kind of eponymous debut album as that classic lineup, and straight away all the elements have come together. You can hear that this is gonna work, and this is gonna just take off and fly, because the harmonies, Christine McVie, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks together, they are there immediately. Of the rhythm section, which has always been fantastic, Mick Fleetwood just behind the beat a little bit, John McVie ahead of the beat a little bit, is perfect for Lindsey Buckingham's really clever crafted layering over the top. So you've got Say You Love Me, you've got Landslide, you've got Rhiannon, World Turning, I'm So Afraid. Monday Morning, Blue Letter. There's not a bad track on here. The consistency of songwriting is fantastic. So to have three songwriters writing at that level, you knew you were on something really special. The Rhiannon is probably the sort of standout track, and Landslide. So again, Stevie Nicks is she's come in and she's hit the ball right out of the park straight off the bat. And interestingly enough, Rhiannon, Bob Harris from the Old Grey Whistle Test, he always said the most impressive thing he ever saw in all those decades of watching bands come into the studio and play was Fleetwood Mac doing Rhiannon, because he said Stevie Nicks was absolutely bewitching. And I went to see Fleetwood Mac many years ago, and I was in the second row, and I was right in front of Stevie Nicks, and she was she just mesmerizing. You can't take your eyes off her. So this is a fantastic first record for them all to make. They must have been so excited. But little did they know what was going to come afterwards. But my number 2 record on this list is the real curio in Fleetwood Mac's canon, and that's Tusk, which divides people hugely. Some people just think it's a big old bloated double album of nonsense. And some people think it's the real gem in Fleetwood Mac's canon. I tend to go towards the second of those opinions. It came out in 1979, and it said that when the Warner's record executives heard it, they all kissed their Christmas bonuses goodbye, because they knew it was just going to bomb. It actually went on to sell 4 million copies, which for any other band would be great, but for Fleetwood Mac at the time, who were the biggest thing in the States, it was a bit of a disappointment. It's a really interesting record. John McVie says it sounds like 3 solo songwriters just going off and doing their own thing, and to a degree it does, especially the Lindsey Buckingham home studio stuff, which I love. I mean, Lindsey Buckingham's such a he just wants to do his own thing. He doesn't want to repeat himself, and you can hear him really sort of stretching his production and songwriting legs on this. He was hugely influenced by punk at the time, and Talking Heads and new wave, and stuff like Not That Funny. They got a real kind of raw appeal to them, because he never lost sense of melody. None of them did. Fleetwood Mac's sense of melody was always incredibly consistent. It is low on hits. I mean, the only big hit from the album was Tusk, which everybody knows. Sarah is on the album, and Storms, another 2 great Stevie Nicks compositions. You can argue there's some filler on here, but Fleetwood Mac filler, I think, is at a better level than a lot of other bands' filler, if that makes sense. Mainly, I think, because Lindsey Buckingham's threshold for quality is so high. But it is an album that divides people, and I totally understand when people say, Tusk, what was that about? But I love it. A lot of my friends love it as well. But number 1, and it's almost impossible not to put this at number 1, really has to be Rumours from 1977. I don't think anybody was prepared for this. It's just there's the mythology and the stories around this album are legendary now. Of course, the band was in turmoil. They were all sleeping with each other, and it was John McVie again who said, well, when listening on playback, he said, well, this album sounds like a load of rumours. and that's how the album got its title. Look, 40 million copies later, and it you can never get tired of hearing it. It sounds like a greatest hits. You've got Dreams, Don't Stop, Go Your Own Way, Gold Dust Woman, The Chain. Just an extraordinary amount of songs of an absolute top quality. The playing has really gelled and come together even more than it did on their debut album. Lindsey Buckingham is really finding his feet as kind of the band leader, and you can hear his fingerprints all over it with this beautifully crafted production, his dynamic guitar playing, his confidence on here. You can hear it sky high, and he's really leading the band through what he knows is a really high quality set of songs. There is absolutely no filler on this record. That's why it's Rumours. That's why Fleetwood Mac went on to become, the biggest thing since Sliced Bread in the States in the late 70s. It's an extraordinary record. It never ages, and it appeals to all generations. I know a lot of young kids who I introduced this record to, and they come back to me and they say, wow, that was brilliant. I really got it. So, you can't deny the appeal of a great song, well played and well produced and presented, because that's exactly what Rumours is full of. That is my brief rundown today of the Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham era Fleetwood Mac. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure you don't agree with me. If not, please say so in the comments below. Be nice, keep it clean. We're all just friends talking about music here, but I'd love to know what you think. So subscribe, get an alert, and I will see you again very soon for another episode of Rock Records Reviewed. Bye. Records Reviewed.